of people going missing because of these things?
All over the place out here. They don't like report it and stuff. The natives have a lot of stories about it. There's all kinds of weird stuff that people see around here that don't get reported.
I was just chilling, having a smoke, and I'm looking down the trail, hoping I get to see her, because then I get to go. And I couldn't believe what it was. It was a Bigfoot, and then a junior right next to him, and it was like he was helping him across the road. And about that time, 2 more come out, and they're a little bigger than the kid that the first 2 was.
And there's a story in there talking about a wild man breaking into their cabin when his mom left him and his sister home. And I just thought it was some crazy drunk guy, or whatever, until I started hearing more about wild man encounters. And I'm like, oh, seriously? And they had to flee their cabin to get away from this thing.
Well, I think they're part of, not the Nephilim, but I think they're part of the corrupted flesh from back in those days that ended up causing the flood of Noah's day, and I mean, that's my own personal beliefs, but it's the only thing that they're so much like us, but yet they're not. I haven't heard much on the supernatural side as far as what people have shared with me. Like when they came in on us, I didn't see them dancing around a Ouija board before they did. You know what I mean? So, I didn't see any portals or any strange lights, but I think they're flesh and blood, and they've just been around forever. I mean, our heritage, it's always been a part of it, our oral history. The hairy man's always been a part of it.
Alaska. Comprised of 665,384 square miles, it is the largest state in the U.S., more than double the size of Texas, the next runner-up, and is 1/5 of the total area of the lower 48. This massive swath of land is also sparsely populated, with untold leagues of unexplored space, just waiting for the intrepid homesteader or adventurer to discover them. It has a population of just over 700,000, a minuscule number compared to its immense size. Alaska became the 49th state on January 3, 1959, only a few months before the 50th, Hawaii. The endless forested acres, breathtaking vistas, and shining coastal regions are the perfect example of true, wild American wilderness. Its name comes from the indigenous language of the Aleut people, the word Alyeska meaning mainland, great country, or perhaps most aptly, great land. The first European settlers arrived in the 1700s. It was quickly realized that Alaska presented a wealth of potential resources, beginning with the fur trade. Gold became a major export in the late 1800s, shortly after the United States acquired territorial rights from Russia. Since then, seafood, crude oil, timber, and more have all become major economic staples. Despite continued settlement and economic development, to this day it still bears an air of mystery, intrigue, and adventure. The siren call of Alaska is heard by many, but answered by only the hardiest human beings. Alaska is seen as a true final frontier, a place which still defies full comprehension, even in the fast-paced age of instantaneous information. It keeps many secrets and yields them only to those who have undertaken the monumental task of living there. Those who do are often thought of as being a tougher, more independent and self-sufficient kind of person. owing to the skill and endurance required to weather Alaska's harsh conditions in safety and relative comfort.
I guess the huge mountains, there's really nowhere I've been to that has mountains as large as Alaska. I mean, the tallest mountain in North America is in Alaska. And I think not only that, the mountains are also jagged as well. They're not kind of like hilly, you know, smooth at the top. They're just these crazy peaks and like almost out of a fantasy movie or something. And I know there's more coast in Alaska, the state itself, than there is in the entire lower 48.
So the Kenai Peninsula is essentially the shoreline and the forests that surround it are rainforest. This is a temperate rainforest, much like that's found in southeast Alaska, down into British Columbia, into the Pacific Northwest. It's all that sort of green belt that's hugging the Pacific coast there.
It's just a really rich environment, very dense. You know, where we were at in the Kenai Peninsula was extremely dense and difficult to navigate through. And I would imagine much of the rest of the state is like that, had there been less snow cover and it was more summery. But even with the snow, I mean, it was like the middle of May and there's still like feet of snow on the ground. Like, that is some intense stuff that I've never experienced.
And it's very isolated. I mean, you are just so far from any sort of help. Anywhere in Alaska, I mean, there's a lot of dangers. There are more dangers than in the lower 48 in terms of wildlife, but the simple isolation of this place, if you were to have a basic injury, that if you're an hour hike outside of a town, okay, you could go get some help. Here you're on your own. You're at least a few hours from a town or hospital or anything like that. So the dangers of just getting out to a place like this can't be understated. It's absolutely a risk just going out there.
Well, I noticed how different it was when I was growing up. Like being native to all our native foods and living off the land and stuff like that, fishing, hunting, picking berries, different seasons. Every season we have something that we're putting away for later. There, I didn't know I couldn't have all my food there, like all dirt roads, pothole city, and only a few cars and trucks, a lot of four-wheelers, snow machines, motorcycles, three-wheelers, whatever. So it was very different going from that lifestyle. Like I had a dog team. We had horses. I lived in the woods. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have running water. We had a generator. We hauled our own water, everything, wood, everything. So it was very different going from there. Of course, I've been into town and stayed with my mom in her apartment and stuff, but it's still, we still live that lifestyle. So going into even Anchorage was like, wow, it's like movies. Then you go downstates to Oregon and all that, and it was like, are they making a movie? Am I in a movie? That's what it felt like. Like, I didn't know all of that existed in real life. I thought, it's everything on TV, you don't believe it. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, I don't believe it. Till I actually got there.
The wildlife of Alaska is diverse and as hardy as its human residents. Bears, assorted species of fish and fowl, marine and land animals alike present a biologically rich gallery of native species. Caribou are found here by the thousands, and even hybrid species of grizzly and polar bears have been confirmed on some occasions. The mighty gray wolf, extinct in many parts of North America, also makes a home here amongst dozens of other species. In a place with so many isolated reaches, it should come as no surprise that large, exotic animals are able to roam here with relative impunity. It may be argued that while human beings live in Alaska, and have for centuries, well before the first European descended settlers, the great land is first and foremost the domain of its unique and fascinating animal ecosystem.
Okay, so Alaska is so much space. There is so much to see here and so little way of seeing it because the terrain here is very rugged. You have to have the right kind of equipment. You have tundra scrub, you have quaking bog, you have muskeg. These are areas where you basically have swamp or marshland, and you can be on solid ground one step and in a 4-foot hole the next. So it can be very difficult to traverse a lot of these areas for humans. And then you have some of the most widespread forest that has less than one person for every 2 square miles. It's pretty incredible just how vast that the wilderness is. And it can seem pretty barren to a lot of outsiders. You can go days out in the bush and you won't see anything, not even small animals in some areas. So unless you are really familiar with the landscape and what you're doing out there, it can be very easy to get lost here, especially in the summer when there's 24-hour daylight. You can't judge by the sun which direction you're going. In the wintertime, it's dark and cold for months at a time. It definitely takes a special kind of breed to be able to tough it out here.
Alaska, in terms of terrestrial wildlife, has a wide variety of animals. I mean, especially between those coastal and inland areas. I mean, inland, of course, you have grizzly bears, caribou. I think the statistic is Alaska's human population is about 730,000, give or take a few thousand, and the caribou population is 750,000 plus. So there's literally more caribou in Alaska than there are human beings. It has the most amount of moose anywhere in North America. Especially in the United States, and the massive Alaskan moose, absolutely majestic animal. Of course, tons of black bears. You've got mountain goats. You've got Dall sheep. A lot of large fauna. So I mean, it's unlike, there are parts of the lower 48 where you have grizzly bears. You have mountain lions. You have some pretty formidable animals. But I don't think there's anywhere like Alaska where you have this range of large herbivores and carnivores, essentially in the same area where. Moose are technically the most dangerous animal in Alaska. They are responsible for the most amount of attacks and fatalities annually.
One of the cryptids in Alaska is actually mountain lions, because we're not supposed to have resident mountain lions here, but they've been seen up into the Kenai Peninsula, and recently they were starting to see them in Delta Junction, which is more in the interior. Fish and Game, they still say, no, we don't have mountain lions, but we're just seeing them more and more. So that's kind of a cryptid. That's going to be the large cat. The next largest cat that does live here for sure would be the lynx. And lynx can be aggressive towards people, but they're probably going to go after a fox or a rabbit or something before they attack a human.
When one thinks about what sort of food resources might be available for Sasquatches in Alaska, it doesn't take very long until you start looking at the analogs that are up there. Like okay, the biggest animals, the biggest carnivores and whatnot live up there. The big brown bears, the Alaskan brown bears. Look at the moose that are there. All the animals there are big. And there's a couple reasons for that, but one of those reasons is the abundance of food resources. Sasquatches, being omnivores, have their pick of what they want to eat, essentially. The salmon runs are still largely unspoilt up there, so literally upstream, there's going to be dead salmon laying on the side of streams. The grizzly bears, of course, are catching them, and Sasquatches may very well do that as well, but they don't have to. You can literally walk on the side of rivers and just pick up spawned out salmon. Well, and of course the salmon are laying eggs everywhere, and let's just go beyond that. What about all the animals that are going after the salmon, right? Down here in the lower 48, we know that Sasquatches go after things like raccoons and possums and skunks. They've been seen eating them. Well, those are up there too. What about rodents? I personally think that rodents are on the menu for every Sasquatch because they're rather easy to get and they're easy to dig out of the hill and that sort of thing. Well, up there the rodents are plentiful. Look at the diet of the big brown bears. The diets of those bears are sure largely fish dependent and things, but they have a huge variety of plants that they eat as well. John Mayenzinski actually does a presentation on this, and I knew there was a lot of food in Alaska, but when Mayenzinski was talking about the food availability of proven things that brown bears eat, I was blown away, just blown away. Like probably 100, 120 plants, and certainly that's not all of them. That's just what they know about so far. Alaska is abundant in every resource. Whether it's protein or carbohydrates, the plants up there are chock full of minerals and vitamins, and you can just tell by looking at the other animals that live there.
It is also said to be home to a seemingly impossible creature, one which could make great use of an environment so tailored to large animals, something which many say is only a legend, but which has been seen too many times by real-life witnesses to easily make such an assertion: the Alaskan Sasquatch.
So it was, let's see, about the beginning of the winter, this last winter that just passed.
Yeah.
I was out scouting a place to cut wood, and I had heard about this trail behind the airport. You're about a mile away. And so I knew where the trail was, so I drove up there, and I drove back probably 200 or 300 yards, and I had actually gotten stuck. There's a place where the water runs down off the mountain and crosses the trail and kind of made it a little swampy area. And the snow, it was the first snow, so there was a little bit of snow on the ground. I didn't realize that I drove out onto it, the swamp, and I got stuck. So I had gotten out and was checking out, see what I needed to do to get out. And so I cut down some wood and was picking my truck up out of the swamp so I could get out. And actually a brown bear walked up on me, walked up right behind me.
Right.
And it spooked me because I didn't even hear him, the bear did. And so I got into the truck, and I was gonna wait him out until he just decided to walk off. So I took a little bit of a nap. I guess it was probably about an hour and a half. Later I woke up and the bear was still there. Well, it was starting to get dark. The sun was starting to go down. The bear was still around, and I noticed that he looked up and looked around and took off, which I was kind of like, that's kind of strange, you know. Mostly they usually don't just hang around either. Well, about 15 or 20 minutes later, I'm still sitting in my truck to make sure he went away, and I noticed something. I don't know, maybe it was 20 yards away, like kind of in the trees moving around. And at first I thought it was just a person or something, but it was all white. So I'm like, that's kind of odd, you know. So I'm still sitting in the truck. I just decided, well, I'm gonna get out and try to get out again, get my truck out. And when I got out, I just had this weird feeling like something's watching me. And so I picked my tools up and everything and put them in the truck. By then, the sun's already going down really good, and I have a couple of flashlights on, and I got my headlights on. And there's some trees probably about that far ahead of me, so 20 feet or so. And I noticed that now whatever it was, it's kind of over behind the trees, and it looked a lot bigger. I would say it's like 12 feet tall, maybe 14 feet, because I seen the top of its head above the trees, like just barely above the trees. I'm like, man, this is not right. So I get back in my truck, and by then I'm really spooked. You know, the hair on the back of my neck's standing, and I'm kind of scared. I don't have a gun with me. I don't carry one. And so I'm just sitting there for a little while. It disappears. After I seen it that one time, I just caught a glimpse of it for a second. I see it again, and now it's off to the left, kind of. It's still on the trail, but behind the trees where they're kind of closing in at the end. And I can see it again, just barely in the headlights. It's just at the end of the lights. And I get like a better view of it because he's standing there with the headlights rolling. and he's definitely like 12 to 14 feet tall. He was pretty wide, and he was white. He had like a round looking head. It wasn't long like you see pictures of him or whatever. I could see his eyes, they were big, and he was just staring right at me.
That's not an SMQ.
Correct. I changed it.
Was there any color to the eyes?
They just looked black.
Just black.
From what I could tell. Like I said, the lights were barely on him. The sun had already gone down, and I couldn't really tell him. It was kind of scary.
Yeah.
He hung out all night. Like, right around there, he would move around behind me, but mostly in front of the vehicle, where I could kind of see him, but kind of not. I don't know why he hung out there. I would take a nap for a little while and wake back up, and he'd still be around. I'd get out of the truck for a second, and I could hear him moving. I don't know if I didn't feel like he was there to harm me or anything. I didn't feel like it was ominous, you know. But I felt like I shouldn't be there.
You didn't grow up in the area, but you've been here for a while, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard any stories about similar things around here?
I've heard of little ones. I have a friend that's seen a couple of little ones. He was out in the woods conch hunting. There are these things that grow on the birch trees that the natives make a tea out of. And he pushed over a tree to get to these conchs at the top. And he heard something behind him, and he turned around, and there was two of them standing there. He said that they had to be like 4 feet tall. They just looked at him for a second and turned around and ran off. And then he was thinking, right, oh, you know, he didn't expect to see that. He was way out in the woods. They call it up north. It's out in Nikiski. This place on the fire escape that we go to cut wood.
Yeah.
But the 2 times that I've seen this white, I want to say it's the same white one, maybe, have been right close to here, within a couple miles of where we're at right now.
Well, when was the last time we saw it?
Probably about a month ago.
Really?
Yeah. There was still a little bit of snow on the ground, and I was out conch hunting, and I was in this area, probably, I want to say it was a mile from the dump, maybe, out behind this lake that's right now from it. And I seen something. At first I thought it maybe a birch tree, because they're white like that, the birch trees are. And it was just standing there, but it was like looking at me, I'm guessing, because I was the only other thing out there that I know of. Kind of spooked me a little bit, so I just grabbed my stuff and left.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking that because of the dump, not too far away from that, there's quite a few lakes around there. There's fish in the lakes and stuff like. There's other predators, smaller game and stuff like that. That it would be a perfect place for something like that to be, because there's food source, constant food source.
Were its features, like its facial features, were they ape-like, or what would you compare it to?
I want to say it was more like the first one I seen. The second one I couldn't tell. First one I seen, it was like it was a person, but it was way too big to be a person. And it almost looks like it was sad, just from what I could tell. Like, we locked eyes for a minute, and it almost looked sad, like, but I couldn't see its mouth really or anything like that. But I could definitely tell it looked like a person almost. It was, like I said, it was way too big to be a person.
So, I mean, in terms of pluses and minuses of something like Sasquatch being discovered in Alaska, I think it just makes sense. I think most people probably wouldn't be surprised, because Alaska has that reputation, that mystique, as that final frontier. It's a place where so many people, especially from the lower 48, go up there, and it has like a special place in their minds. People go there to escape. It's that kind of, it's the last stop on on the road sort of thing. So I think people wouldn't be surprised by something like Sasquatch being in a place like Alaska. Many people I've talked to that are, you know, not into the topic of Sasquatch, oh yeah, Alaska, that's where they'd be, sort of thing. So, I mean, I think it would be a draw in terms of tourism for sure, if it was proven in Alaska that Sasquatches existed. But I think it would be, you know, kind of, there's already such a great tourism industry there in terms of unlimited things you can do, whether you're a big game hunter or hiker, camping, sport fisherman, deep sea fishing. There's everything you can imagine in Alaska. I think Bigfoot would fit right into that, and you'd probably have Bigfoot tours, you know, and it'd probably be cheesy in my opinion, because you don't really need to do that all for Bigfoot, but people don't know the topic, so.
We never thought Bigfoot was in Alaska, never. This was, you know, before, of course, we weren't studying Bigfoot or anything, but we felt totally safe from that. Now, bears is another thing, but Bigfoot, we never thought about it. It wasn't until basically the birth of the internet, which renewed my interest in Bigfoot. I remember the day was probably 94, dial-up on the modem. I was bored, and I opened up a search engine and I typed in Bigfoot, just out of curiosity, hit enter. Up come all these websites. And I remember the first website I went to was Bobby Short's, Bigfoot Encounters. So that is a wonderful website. It is just packed with information and stories and whatnot. So I actually got to know her, and I began, you know, getting really interested in the subject because I've known eyewitnesses my life. I've always wanted to hear their story. I wouldn't consider myself a researcher or anything, just very curious. So it was about that time I decided that I got sick and tired of the blurry drawings and the crappy drawings, the blurry pictures, and I really wanted to find out what they look like. I just got really curious. And being a professional illustrator, I started divulging a lot of my personal time into interviewing at least credible eyewitnesses that I felt, talking to anybody I knew that maybe have seen one, just so I could get the faces, so I could figure out what they look like. And that's kind of what led me into it. And I just kept talking to people, and you know, again, very credible police officers, military, all kinds of people I've talked to.
I had honestly never even thought or considered anything about Bigfoot being in Alaska, ever at all. And I had some relatives come up from Georgia to visit, and I was showing them around Alaska for about 10 days. And we went up to Independence Mine one of the days, and it was on September 4th, 2018. And we went up there, and it had officially closed for the season, but you could park in the lower parking area and still walk up to the mine and stuff. And so three of the ladies went on up, and one of the others, she kind of stayed back, and I just kind of hung with her, and we ended up just walking up to the mine and then coming back. And when we came back down to my truck, she was getting in the back passenger side, and I went around to the front, and she just stopped dead in her tracks. She's like, "Shane, what is that?" And I said, "What is what?" And she's like, "What is that?" And so she pointed up on the hillside there. And I turned around and looked, and that's when I saw what I saw. And of course I started fumbling, trying to get my binoculars. And by the time I got my binoculars, it had crested the hill and was gone. And the area where it crested, there were a series of trees up there at the time. They're no longer there. Weather's knocked them down, given way. And I kind of gauged those trees against one of the facility doors up at the mine, you know, standard 7-foot door or whatnot, and kind of gauged it over with my thumb to the trees. And I guess the trees were probably 24, 25 feet tall. And this thing was every bit as a third of tall as that one of those trees. And of course I didn't believe what I'd seen. But I started telling her, you know, I said, you know, up here in Alaska, they have the stories of the hairy man and stuff like that. And, you know, we just kind of, the other three, when they got back to the truck and we drove back home, they were all just kind of giggling and laughing and stuff. And I just was, and the other lady, we were just kind of both silent, you know. And then when I got home and told the story, it's like my wife cut her eyes at me like, okay. you know. And so that really kind of is what got me into it.
I had a gentleman walk in here, good old guy, you know, old retired guy, a little pot belly, suspenders, never been in here before. He walks in, hi, how you doing? I'm like, oh, good. He walks in here, I come in about a minute later. How you doing? He says, so, you believe in Bigfoot? And I said, well, yes, yeah, I do. He goes, well, I got a predicament. I said, well, you do? What's your predicament? He says, well, my wife and I just moved into my cabin out in Chickaloon, which is about 10 miles that way. And he says, something's been throwing rocks at his roof. And I said, whoa, you know, red flags, or not red flags, green flags. Wow, what? He says, yeah, big rocks. He said, I took a ladder up there and there's dents in the roof. He's got a steel roof. He says, it's scaring the grandchildren. And I said, wow, how long has this been going on? He said, since they moved in. And, well, is there anything else? Do you hear anything? He says, come to think of it, we're missing 3 chickens. Okay, so, again, it's just intriguing. I don't know. I got his number. I told him to call me if anything, you know, I'd love to go out there and just look around. But I hear stories like that all the time here.
There is a long history of Bigfoot sightings in Southeast Alaska in particular, that stretch that goes along the coast by British Columbia. Up in the mainland, if you want to call it that, like central Alaska, the big part, I suppose, there are fewer reports, but that does not mean there are fewer Sasquatches. You see, to have a Sasquatch sighting, what you need is a Sasquatch and a human in the same place. That, you know, the human has to see the Sasquatch, and that human has to be willing to share that information with someone else, probably a researcher of some sort. And that's kind of a magic combination. It doesn't happen all the time. In fact, I think it's very rare. And I think it's even more rare in Alaska because of Alaskans. Alaskans are just kind of an unusual type of person. They kind of remind me of people who live in Maine, for example. There's a reason they live in the corner, like the upper corner of the United States. It's either to stay away from everybody down here or to keep everyone down here away from them. There's one of those 2 reasons, I guarantee it, because outsiders are looked upon with a sidelong glance, and like they are outsiders. And the people up in Alaska, they don't really want to share stuff like that with, or stuff like, hey, I saw a Bigfoot, with people who are on the outside. In fact, they probably don't even want to share it with each other, because some of these far-flung rural areas where Sasquatches are seen, although a lot of places in Alaska are far-flung rural areas just right outside of town. But a lot of times, the people who live there, their reputation is the most valuable thing they have. Why would they run the risk of ruining it by saying they saw something that everybody else doesn't even think is real?
It basically does not make sense to me either. They are big enough creatures, they could conceivably migrate in the winter to the coastal areas where there is lots of food. As the native people say, when the tide goes out, the table is set. So they may do that, but we have reports up at Barrow even. There's reports all over the state. One thing I've noticed is that reports tend to follow the caribou. Where there's caribou, particularly in winter, that's where you can get reports. This is also pure speculation, but Alaska has a history of caribou populations crashing without explanation. They start going downhill in certain areas, and then that happens for a while, and then they start building up there again, and somewhere else in the state, they're starting to go downhill quickly. This area at the Sushiana I keep mentioning, this was in early January, when it's hard to explain an animal like that making a living, but there was lots of caribou around. And the caribou reacted somewhat atypically to us when we were out there. When they would see us at a great distance, bipeds walking around, they would run. Whereas I've had times out there, I'm on a snow machine and I gotta stop the snow machine and wait for the caribou to cross the trail when they don't care. So I found that another interesting little data point.
Since the turn of the 20th century, rumors of upright, hairy ape-like creatures have sprung up from various parts of Alaska, and they show no sign of ceasing. Even before the term Bigfoot was coined, or Sasquatch had gained worldwide recognition, Encounters which seem to fall squarely into this category have rippled across the Alaskan landscape. It was the mid-century, the 1930s and 1950s respectively, that the words Sasquatch and Bigfoot entered into the public consciousness, as newspapers ran sensational stories describing huge, ape-like monsters in the Pacific Northwest. But frightening reports of upright creatures in the Alaskan wilderness are said to predate even the 20th century. Terms such as hairy man, bushman, and even the cannibal have persisted in some areas for untold years. One of the earliest encounters in Alaska, perhaps the first documented, was penned by a man named Harry Culp, and is said to have taken place in the early 20th century, perhaps as early as 1900 or even before. Culp would recount the story secondhand, claiming that the original witnesses had long since passed away. The Culp encounter would remain buried until the 21st century, largely lost to time, until Harry Culp's daughter would share a long-buried manuscript with the world. 4 destitute prospectors were sharing a cabin in a place known as Wrangell, Alaska. They caught wind of a potential gold claim in an area known as Thomas Bay, which, according to Culp's account, was known by the native inhabitants of the region as the Bay of Death. One of them, a man named Charlie in the story, set out on the 50-mile journey from Wrangell to Thomas Bay by canoe, laden with supplies. About 2 months later, Charlie would return to Wrangell carrying a large chunk of gold-flaked quartz, and as Culp describes him, looked like he had gone through hell. The man was despondent for a day or so, unwilling to discuss his experience, before finally saying to his companions, "I'm through with Alaska and never want to see it again." Finally, he told his story. Charlie had ventured into the wilderness, and after locating a suitable place to camp, spent some time organizing provisions and making the location as comfortable as possible. While hunting grouse to replenish his food stores, he had stumbled and fallen down the side of a slope and found a large piece of quartz riddled with gold flakes on the climb back up. Despite this rich find, what happened next would scare him off spending any more time in Alaska than he absolutely had to. Charlie continued his journey, but before long, described the following. "Right there, fellows, I got the scare of my life. I hope to God I never see or go through the likes of it again. Swarming up the ridge toward me from the lake were the most hideous creatures. I couldn't call them anything but devils, as they were neither men nor monkeys, yet looked like both." While Charlie's account does not specifically mention Bigfoot or Sasquatch, the events relayed do seem similar to many purported Sasquatch encounters. Never mind the fact that this event is alleged to have taken place well before these words became widely used. Large, humanoid beings, behaving in an aggressive, even territorial manner. He even describes them as being neither men nor monkeys, looking like both. Some modern-day encounters continue this trend of seemingly dangerous, upright creatures, frightening the unaware when they least expect it. Native peoples have also told stories of the hairy man and other creatures we may think of as being Sasquatch-like. These descriptions, coupled with more recent eyewitness reports, paint a picture as to what the Alaskan Sasquatch might look like.
I've heard there's a lot of giants in native legend around here, and some people think that there might be some cases of people saying, "Hey, I saw a Bigfoot," when they mean these giant, some sort of humans or something that are giant. There have been a few cases of archaeologists coming across like giant skeletons buried with tribal people, or it's more like there's one giant skeleton and then there's a couple tribal people that have been buried with them. Those people, like those cases were taken to the Smithsonian long time ago.
There's always been stories of Bigfoot in Alaska. Port Chatham was obviously really well known. Even in my childhood, there were stories down in that area. But there have always been hairy man or bushman stories. from Alaskan natives and hunters, things like that, all the way through from the 1800s to modern day. You'd sometimes see articles in the Anchorage Daily News and things like that.
Hairy man, Chikyle. There's other words that are just too throaty. I don't know if you guys have heard Yupik spoke, but it's very, very throaty. Sounds like someone's clearing their throat to spit. Not being disrespectful, that's just what it is. My grandma taught me when I was young, but I didn't retain that shit. I moved away to the city, and none of that, you know, coming back and forth once a year and then being out on a fishing boat, I didn't have a chance to just constantly use it. I can understand most of it, but speaking it, I didn't keep up with it. So it's one of those, I can sing happy birthday, you know, but you know, you can hear that on KDLG every day, so.
In the, I think it was in the 30s, there was a hunter around the Bethel or Barrow area who said that he was out hunting and he had set up camp for the night, and in the morning he had observed a female with a juvenile that she was feeding. She had it in her lap and she was feeding it. And he had observed it for several minutes before it noticed him, and it got up with its infant and had taken it away. There's a very interesting story from someone out of Nenana who had supposedly taken in a juvenile that had been injured and had basically rehabilitated it, and it stayed with this individual for several years apparently. And I think Jessie will have more to tell you about that one, so I'm going to leave that to her. But it's one of my favorite stories that come out of Alaska.
My personal opinion is, I think, as far as native legends and lore across the spectrum, not just here in Alaska, but I really think that the key to recognition of this being, species, whatever you might want to call it, is through the native tribes and affiliations. I think that's the key, personally, because they recognize these beings as part of their culture, and in many of the cultures they recognize it as being a part of their even religious aspects of their culture.
The Nantinak is probably the most well known right now because of Port Chatham, but there's also like the Bushman, the Harryman, the Gilliak is something that people up here in the interior and towards the Arctic Circle have for him. And that creature, according to Alaskan natives, is the cannibal. That's what they call him, the cannibal. He's supposedly a giant man. He's sometimes described as wearing a hat or a hood, and that he actively hunts and eats people. They have a very strong fear of him. Miners did in the 30s and 40s, and in fact there were many miners that wouldn't go past the King Salmon River here in the Ruby type area of Alaska because they believed that the other side of the river, the northern side, was the Gilliak territory and you could get eaten or taken. There was an encounter where 3 hunters were hunting caribou up there in around September or August, and in the night one of them was killed and taken off somewhere, and they had an entire village out looking for him and never could find him. So
you know, one of the reasons I started coming forward to share is, like, the lower 48 is totally different than up here, obviously, you know, and I was hearing a lot of these fanciful things about people basically having them as friends and family groups for a dozen years, and, you know, 8, and they know all their names and stuff, and I'm like, I don't see that. I've never seen anything friendly, you know, like what year was it? 1995. We were walking up this meadow, we were looking for ptarmigan, and as we're going up, you gotta, have you guys seen what a muskeg is yet? It's basically swampy tundra, and then you got black spruce, little islands of it. Well, we're walking up, and it wasn't a marshy part, but as we're coming up, we hear this grunt off to the side of us, and as we look over, man, it gives me a chill. This thing stood up and then ran away from us, right? And so initially we're like, well, that was weird. And then it started throwing stuff, so we started leaving the area, and as we're leaving the area, all it was doing was breaking trees. It was taking birch about that big around, just snapping it. Like, that didn't seem too friendly. Now, it's easy to, 20/20 hindsight and say it was aggressive, but it could have just been running us out of its berry picking patch, I mean, it was about 7 foot tall, kind of like I would call it like a cinnamon kind of brownish color, not very long hair, probably about 4 to 6 inches. Had longer hair right here, but as far as the face, all you could make out was just kind of like a little glint from the eyes. It was kind of in the shade of the trees, so when it stood up, it was more silhouetted than anything, and then when it cleared running away on the back side of that, then you saw its coloration a little better.
A couple years ago, I was going down to Nenana pretty constantly to gather Bigfoot stories and UFO stories. And one of the guys at the visitor center there told me the story of a Bigfoot child from the 1860s. So Nenana is right on the Nenana River and the Tanana River. And it's not uncommon for people, I guess it's less common now, but it used to be pretty common for people to use the river to go over to the Copper River area and do salmon fishing and maybe winter over there and then come back to Nenana, that sort of thing. So this older lady, she had done that. She had gone over to the Copper River area and kind of got snowed in, so she just wintered there. And during the winter, it got real cold, and she noticed that there was something outside the cabin that she was staying in, and she saw that it was a Sasquatch, like a young Sasquatch, and it was really cold out. So as she didn't want to mess with it, she didn't want repercussions, from messing with it. But it got really, really cold out, and she decided to bring it inside. And so it came inside, and it just stayed with her. She thought it was going to warm up and then take off, but it just stayed with her. And, if she went outside to like get firewood, it would go outside and get firewood too and help her out that way. And then, with melting and stuff coming around, she went back to Nenana with this Bigfoot child in tow. And she was kind of an older lady, so she just decided to stay in Nenana after that. And she also had this Bigfoot child that was with her. And as the story goes, this thing, it lived with her. It would wear some articles of clothing, like it might wear a hat or something. And it wouldn't really bother any other people, but it would help her like carry heavy things back to her house. Like if she went to get a 50-pound bag of flour, it would carry that for her. And she could also, it got to the point where she could get it to understand a couple words, and she could send it to the store to pick up like her grocery order, that sort of thing, and bring it back. And I was told that it could say a couple words, not a lot of words. I don't know what the words were. It probably was like maybe yes, no. I don't know what else the other words would be, but like, basic, very basic words. And once the lady passed away, this thing just wandered into the woods, and no one ever saw it again. So that is the 1860s Bigfoot child story. I don't know the lady's name. I just have the story that I was told. But that's the fun about going around to places and gathering stories. Is you come up with some weird ones like that, and it makes you think, did it happen?
Sightings of Alaskan Sasquatch seem to be typified by large animals. While most potential Bigfoot encounters mention a creature 6 to 8 feet in height, some tales from the Alaskan wilderness describe things even larger, in excess of 10 feet or more. Theories abound as to why this may be, with some even saying that Alaska itself naturally produces larger, hardier animals. It seems the Alaskan Sasquatch is intelligent enough to utilize trails and pathways to move quickly through the landscape without being regularly spotted. Sightings adjacent to game trails add to this idea. And sometimes, inexplicable paths are found stretching into barren areas of wilderness, their origin a mystery. It may be that these creatures hibernate, simply remaining hidden for much of the year. Bears in the coldest part of Alaska may hibernate for 7 months out of the year. Could a creature as large as Sasquatch do the same? Perhaps observing these known species might give us an idea of how a creature like Sasquatch would move, feed, and survive. It would also seem that these creatures are perfectly at home in the harsh Alaskan wilderness, even seeming not to mind the frigid waters of its lakes and rivers. The Alaskan Sasquatch often appears near bodies of water, sometimes even swimming or seeming to hunt for fish. In the coldest months, the water temperature in Alaska averages at approximately 35 degrees Fahrenheit. No small stretch of endurance for any creature seeking to swim or bathe in it. Sightings like these would seem to preclude the notion of a human being, as hyperthermia in these conditions is a constant danger. Any animal that can ford the rivers and streams of Alaska would need to possess an unusually strong resistance to cold weather, far stronger than the average person.
Does it seem like there's more sightings down in the lowlands during winter, or like where do they hide now during the winter?
I would think that by the dump, there has got to be a place somewhere out there, because it's federal land, a game reserve, I believe, and you can't take motorized vehicles out there. There's nobody really that stays out there but a few crazy people, homeless people or whatever, but not a lot of people will talk about it. A lot of people around here have seen them, from time to time. But a lot of people won't talk to you about it because they think you're crazy. I don't mind telling people that I've seen it, which I don't go around advertising. But I would think around the dump here would be a great place for it because of the food source.
Right.
Apparently, they got to eat. They got to eat something.
Right.
So there's all kinds of little animals that live around there. During the winter time. And during the summer especially, and then we have the river right here. So water source, fish during the summer, all summer long. I don't think that they necessarily build houses and stuff like that, but they gotta have something to get out of the weather, I would think.
Right.
And I've thought about it a few different times, going out and looking for them. But I can't find anybody to go with me, and it's really dangerous to be out in the woods, even during the summertime, during the day out here. Like I said, people go missing all the time. People that are survival experts go out in their backyard and they're never seen again. You're not guaranteed, to come back, even going out in your backyard, especially once you get out of city limits. I don't know what it is, but a lot of people go missing out here and they never get reported. We hear about it all the time. So
I remember one night we had done a long hunt, and we were coming back. I had shot a moose, and it's pitch black, and we were having troubles with the ATV, and we stopped and we're trying to fix our trailer hitch, and we had, all of a sudden there was this foul smell, and we heard tree knocks. And I'm telling you, I guess I do have an in person, and I was kind of oblivious to what was going on, and I looked up, and our friend buddy, he's putting a round in his rifle, and he says, "Johnny, hurry up, we got to get out of here." And when we got back to the cabin about 7 hours later, I said, "Well, what was going on up there?" He says, "Oh, that was Bigfoot." He says, "Wait, didn't you smell it?" I says, "Yeah, I did. I didn't know what was going on." And in the same area, the very next year, my friend Greg was up there hunting with Buddy, and he heard screeching, loud, piercing, a wail. It's the best way you could describe it, a screech, high-pitched, drawn out, and a cow moose and a calf just came screaming past him, running. I mean, for this moose was running for her life, Greg says, and ran right past him. I mean, didn't even give Greg a second look, just totally blew past him. And the next day they went and they actually found tracks. All the quintessential you see in Meldrin's book, I mean, these guys are backwoodsmen. They know what a bear track looks like and there's no way these guys, that's why your best information is always going to come from the native community or the backwoodsmen, people like Buddy and Greg and myself. Because, never happened that we're going to confuse a bear track or anything else with Bigfoot. And there was another instance involving Greg and Buddy in the wintertime. They were going up the river right out here to Gold Creek, which is 40 miles. It was a 40-mile run. And under snow machines, they stopped and they're taking a break. They got a little fire going. And they see what at first they think is a bear up the river, but then they see it's bipedal. And it was digging in the bank. They didn't go investigate because they said they just wanted to get out of there.
On the same trip, if I could continue with that vein, I went up this drainage, which has an ominous name. It's called Bear Draw. It's called Bear Draw because it's a V drainage. So when you're in it, if there's a bear coming down and you're going up, you two are going to meet. I was hiking by myself, so I was a little bit nervous, but I got through it okay, did my hike up to Mount Sheldon, came back down again. And I was feeling a little spooked because it's Bear Draw, and of course you're nervous about hiking in Bear Draw. I was almost to the big Toklat River Bar, which is about a 2 mile wide in places glacial river bar. I was hiking in the creek bed itself, but it's only about 50 feet wide of gravel. And the creek was making some noise, but I was stopped in my tracks when I heard a deep baritone, "Oi." It was much like that. And I stopped, and I'm into Sasquatch and all, and I think to myself, should I go into those yonder dark woods and go see what made that noise? Maybe it was a weird bear sound, I don't know. And I carefully reasoned it through, and I decided it would be best if I just skedaddled. So as they say, I opened up a big can of Gone. And I just headed downstream until I got out into the open. But several years later, I'm listening. Can I mention other researchers? M.K. Davis, he's got a video, it's called Shed Sounds, I believe. And I'm listening to that. And this is a case where nothing showed up on the CCTV that they had rolling, but it had audio recording as well. And this was on a shed. It sounded like a tool shed. And you can hear the sounds of something going into the shed and rifling through the stuff and muttering. And imitating a human voice, but not doing it very well. It seemed like it had been listening to the owner of the shed and was repeating things it had heard, which wasn't the best stuff it was repeating. But at one point, it seems to be trying to say hi. And the last time it says hi, it comes out, "Oi," just the sound I'd heard.
Sasquatch in Alaska might also be more aggressive than their southern cousins, if eyewitnesses are to be believed. Many reports indicate that they are not at all friendly, and perhaps even dangerous. Rumors have abounded for decades of whole towns which were abandoned due to their residents regularly disappearing at the hands of tall, hairy, elusive creatures skulking out of the Alaskan forest to snatch their victims in numbers lost to history. Today, rumors of dangerous entities beyond even the most ferocious predators known to live in Alaska circulate from person to person and town to town. Cases such as that of Port Chatham, located in the southern portion of the Kenai Peninsula. It was, at the time of its discovery, considered an ideal location, its bay offering shelter from the harsh and turbulent seas. Once the home of a thriving fish cannery, Port Chatham and the town of Portlock were abandoned in the mid-20th century amidst a backdrop of mysterious deaths, disappearances, and rumors of something monstrous living in the woods. Even as late as the 1970s, stories of hunters encountering humanoid creatures, perhaps the Alaskan Sasquatch itself, endured. Today, researchers continue to foray into the frigid wilderness in and around the Kenai Peninsula in search of the truth behind the mysterious and turbulent history of this scenic and isolated location. While other factors, such as changing economic conditions and even the remoteness of Port Chatham itself, may have played a role in its abandonment, it has become an inseparable aspect in the discussion surrounding the Alaskan Sasquatch.
Yeah, I absolutely think that Sasquatch up here are probably more aggressive. For one thing, I think there's more competition as far as other predators. You have wolves, you have wolverines, you have bear. They are all very tenacious predators, so they probably have to be more aggressive, not only as far as competing for food, but territory, protecting their family if they live in family units. And I also think that Bigfoot from different regions or Sasquatch from different regions probably have slight, I don't want to say cultural differences, but behavioral differences. I think the Bigfoot of the Pacific Northwest are a little more calm in their demeanor. They kind of observe and don't really interact with humans if they can avoid it. But I think up here, even dealing with moose are the most deadly animals in the state above bears or wolves or anything else. They are more likely to attack you. So even if, there was an encounter with one of them, I think a Sasquatch would have to be more aggressive.
What we do is take a 32-foot fishing boat, and on the back stern of it, we would use some 2x4 material to create an A-frame and then hang a tarp so we can hang our moose quarters on it, right? So we're coming back from moose camp, which is basically we camped out on the big boat, took the skiff, kept it easy. Well, as we were coming back down by Black Bluff and Angel Bay, we got grounded on a sandbar. And it's a tidal zone, so we had to wait for the tide to come in. And as we're doing our thing, our older cousin was like, well, let me take the younger kids, we'll go not commercial, but sport fishing with the rods and reels, get them out of your hair. So we get in the skiff, and as we're backing away from the my uncle's fishing boat, there was splashing in the water, but we figured the salmon were jumping or something, but they started calling for us to come back. So we get back to the boat. As soon as we got back to the boat, we were only 25 feet away. As soon as we got to the stern of the boat to start getting back in, the screaming started, and then we saw it standing up there, just the silhouette of this thing just screaming, and started chucking rocks. Got us inside there, and they didn't start shooting at it until one of the rocks broke through our tarp and knocked one of the quarters of meat off of the little A-frame stand we had. And then the rest of it was just us down hearing muffled shots and screaming off in the distance because they were trying to hide us kids from it. That was That up until then, it was real, but it didn't become real. You know what I mean? The reality of it, like actually physically throwing something at us, was just boggling. It really was. And when you try to tell kids at school, they just, oh geez, the hairy man, then you go and play Star Wars, you know, or G.I. Joe or whatever they were doing then.
They seem intelligent, beyond what we might expect from a standard animal. There often seems to be intention or even prior planning behind their movements, as if they are much more aware of Alaska's human occupants than those human occupants are of them. They appear near cabins and campsites as often as they do in wild, uncharted places. In some cases, they are even said to mimic the voices of human beings, perhaps implying a desire to lure the unsuspecting into the wilderness. To what end, or why, is unknown. As strange as some of these events may seem, they continue to be discussed and reported by witnesses and researchers. Reports of these elusive creatures are also not limited to any one region of the Alaskan tundra. From small islands to mainland forests and many places in between, potential Sasquatch encounters continue to accumulate. Even the historical reports of the early 1900s are spread far and wide. Thomas Bay, the location of Charlie's frightening run-in with what he called devils, and the former fishing and cannery village of Portlock, now a ghost town, sit on opposite sides of the Gulf of Alaska, separated by a little over 700 miles. Even more populous areas such as Fairbanks and Anchorage, and smaller locales including Bethel and Prince of Wales Island, have played host to Sasquatch sightings of varying intensity.
We went to Nanwalek, and it was the second time we went on a trail. There's a trail that goes all the way to Dogfish Bay. So we'd just leave, and I mean, the town is still like right there. We're just in the trail. I don't have time to even think about taking pictures or anything, you know. I definitely wasn't looking for Bigfoot, nothing. So we're going through this trail, and so I recognized, you know, we're supposed to go this way because I can see where the creek is. And I saw somebody or something take off this way as we were going one way. So I thought, I wonder where that trail leads. So I said, hey, where's this, where does that go? Are we turning that way? And my friend says, no, what'd you see? I said, I saw somebody really tall. I thought was maybe on a four-wheeler, but I didn't hear anything. There's no trail, so it couldn't have been. And all the people there are my height and wide. They're short and stocky. So there's no 8, 9 feet tall people there. So what I saw ran, it was so fast, I thought somebody was in a hoodie on a four-wheeler, like moving forward, going really fast. Because I have no idea. I don't. This is only my second time going through the trail, so I don't know I don't know it all yet there. And so the bushes were maybe right around the knee to whatever this was. And it was so fast. I have no idea. I mean, I just saw this black, tall thing running through or whatever. And when I went to go stand at where it was standing, the bushes were about this tall on me. And on the other side, where it was running full blast. There's a 30-foot cliff there, and it's the base of the mouth of the creeks that go up to 3 lakes. So it's pretty wide. And it's steep, equally steep on both sides, and there's a lot of air in between. There's people fishing down there, and nobody said anything. They've seen them all, you know, and stuff. People just say to be careful. A lot of them, they don't go out at night in the woods. He does follow them around. He's followed us around. He's followed us with the kids and the dogs.
Apex predator as well as apex scavenger. In the winter, they have a pretty successful wintering strategy because it takes a certain amount of calories, you know, when it's 40 below to stay warm. There's probably some periods of inactivity like everything else, but not a true hibernation or or anything like that, but I think that they follow caribou herds, taking advantage of that, just like wolves do. A wolf pack will follow the caribou herd as it does the annual migration. Some regional migration taking place, the south side of the valley might have the cranberries that are ripe right now, and the north side, it's not so good. So then they're crossing, 2 or 3 different miles or valleys to get to a different food source. So I would say omnivore, vegetation, and meat, omnivore. So my son and I, we've had different experiences where we've been out and something has mimicked our voice. The whole time that we're talking, we can hear it mimicking, and then we stop, and we're in a situation, a location where it's not an echo. We've had that a couple of different times. We've done some wood knocks and then had grunts back, things like that. But the samurai chatter and stuff, if it's happening in Alaska, it's not being reported to me. So,
I think they are intelligent, but another part of the enigma is, they're intelligent like, from our point of view, an 11, 12-year-old, a lot of them more like 8-year-old, very prone to anger, but also very curious, very clever. Certainly it's true that in the woods they're way more on the ball than us humans, but what doesn't make sense is, technologically speaking, they're not geniuses or anything. You look at things like the tree structures, some things I've seen, and they're not works of art. They're not great architecture. So how do we explain them avoiding trail cams and infrared and FLIRs, and how do they live raiding people's garbage cans in suburbia, which a lot of them seem to be? I've got things that have happened across the road here that I've wondered about. I expect that there has been something happening on this property you're on at some point. Here it seems to be intermittent. It seems to be driven by food supplies, etc. But I get the impression things have happened right here in this rural Alaskan subdivision. And how do we explain that? I have theories, but they're just wild, and it's only because I'm trying to fill in the gaps. And I don't know. I've heard them, I believe, imitating owls close by here, and a rooster once. And I presumed it was a really sick rooster that was having some medical issues. And I asked somebody, it was down a long driveway just across the road here. I asked a mutual friend, hey, they apparently have chickens. And I just got a blank look, and I was told, I don't have chickens down there. But that's where a rooster was making noise from as I walked by.
In 2022, Small Town Monsters embarked on a long-anticipated 17-day trip into the Alaskan wilderness. Despite jet lag, illness amongst the crew, and a variety of travel-related challenges, what they uncovered seemed to cement the actuality of an undiscovered creature lurking in the Alaskan wilderness. After dozens of interviews, witnesses and researchers alike would, and do, provide claims to support the idea that Bigfoot is as much a part of Alaska as any known native animal. The team arrived in Anchorage and traveled all through the Kenai Peninsula, going on up to Healy and then into Denali, exploring all the hills and valleys along the way. While the mystery continues, the search for the Alaskan Sasquatch has far from met its end.